past couple of years, as I've been getting to know him, Coyne has become like one of my first phone calls on anything that is sort of vertical software adjacent. So he's been an early employee, he's been a venture investor, and he's now more recently sort of like a one-man startup studio, putting teams together, working with founders, investing. Um, he has been really an awesome thought partner to me as we sort of figure out different kinds of vertical software businesses. He has this really broad view that is substantiated by actually doing the work, helping start a number of companies over the past couple of years.
Here's a provocative one to get started with. I have a question for you. What will it look like when we have really good tech for lawyers, for small lawyers, your local DUI attorney? What's that going to look like?
I mean, DUI attorneys are actually a really great example here. I think that that is probably the place where it's going to happen first. When you get a DUI, you have a specific outcome that you need to drive towards. It's highly measurable. Do you pay a fine? Do you go to jail? So that sort of like contingency based law is the place that you're going to see this first. And I think your question gets at something really important, which is the opportunities to win here for small business is really where you can put up demonstrable wins rather than doing these kind of softer things around better practice management or save time or, you know, something like DUIs or immigration law or medical malpractice. Like those are instances where you actually can say, I won or I lost, I serviced more clients or fewer. Is this thing driving more money into my pocket? And when that becomes true, the risk and cost curve of entrepreneurship go down.
Yeah.
As you bend the risk and cost curve of entrepreneurship, you almost necessarily will wind up seeing more medical entrepreneurs, more legal entrepreneurs, more home services entrepreneurs. Right now, the only way for so many of these people to compete and survive is to join the big platform that can handle so much of the things that they can't. We exist in a world of increasing specialization where I'm not an attorney. I handle a very narrow and specific part of a legal workflow. And I am only valuable if I exist in a context that can take care of everything else. As a consequence, the money and the wealth and the power accrues to the people who own and manage those institutions, not the people who drive the outcomes for them. I don't think that's really good for our economy. I don't think it's good for our democracy. I don't think it's good for our society. I think it stifles and chokes off barriers to wealth and prosperity for the middle and even upper middle class.
Yeah. So here's my question. So when you think about the DUI attorney, we can imagine a lot of different ways, and we've seen a lot of different business models that someone might serve really good technology for a DUI attorney. And one of those might be just classic SaaS for DUI attorneys. One of those might be a business in a box, sort of virtual franchise for a DUI attorney, where I have X% of my whatever revenue, but you're still Yoni's DUI attorney, right? Call Yoni. One of these things might be that you exist behind some larger brand and you're in some way independent and operating independently, but you are still, it's like the McDonald's of DUI attorneys, and they're big ads nationally, and it's like work with a McDonald's DUI attorney, and you're one of them. And all of these things might be really asset light. And we can also imagine some roll up and the like various different flavors of roll up strategies. What's the natural end state?
So look, this actually already exists. This is what Morgan and Morgan is. Morgan and Morgan is the biggest law firm in the country. They don't practice law. They're a lead gen business for downstream personal injury attorneys. They basically do nothing beyond that. So we know that if you can go and drive people high quality, highly transactable leads, you make it much more possible for them to run their business. You set them up to only do the parts of it that they want to do and do well, which is actually like practicing law. And you can build a really big business for yourself doing it. The problem is that like in a world where those lead gen businesses, I think, become harder and harder to run over time, it's necessary and sufficient to drive someone leads. So we actually have a precedent for what an asset light or sort of franchised version of a law firm looks like, and it's Morgan and Morgan, and they're really successful. Also, 1-800-lawyer or whatever.
Right.
These are these call center businesses that direct your call to someone locally who bids for the lead, who services you. These things already exist. And I think we can draw a lot of inspiration from them. The challenge is doing it better, and in more of a wraparound way that further decreases the size of the atomic unit that can actually serve it and build a business.
Right. And one way that you might do that is actually by offering a lawyer to, well, let's think. I mean, there are clearly ways that you can you can allow the lawyer to be a better lawyer. And part of this is, okay, sure, they get better leads. But part of it also might be that they know all the relevant case law,
Yes.
or they can answer your phone. They can answer your phone call on a Saturday. A little bit of personal history. I got hit by a car in Brooklyn 3 months ago, and I found myself on the weekend calling lawyers.
Yeah.
And the lawyers that answer their phone on the weekend moved way high up my stack because now I'm talking to the specific lawyer. Well, it's probably pretty hard for a lawyer to answer the call whenever someone gets hit by a car. People get hit by cars all the time. And so that's good and interesting. And the question is then what's the business model that makes it the best to serve? Yeah.
And so I think so much of it is going to be this combination of things that we already know work individually and bringing some of those things together. So doing the lead gen business, yeah, for sure, but also starting to add in the AI that picks up the phone and starts doing client intake with you at 11:30 on a Saturday night while you're waiting for the cops to come, and after a fender bender. It's, hey, I need to put together all of the relevant cases. I need to do the legal research. I need to start grading cases to even decide as an attorney which one is good for me to take. If I'm getting paid on contingency, I need to basically underwrite each case I take. And that means, doing some real meaningful objective analysis instead of just fingering the wind. So each of those things are an opportunity for tools. It's an opportunity for systems, for some kind of lead gen platform. I tend to think that the biggest and best businesses that we're going to see here are going to combine elements of all three rather than believing that we're going to see a proliferation of point solutions, because we have markets that kind of already work like that and they just don't work that well. They wind up getting competed to death. Any of the individual companies can't really succeed. You're trying to then integrate all these different tools and systems together. And the whole, it's a negative sum game as opposed to the positive sum game, I think, of selling and building more integrated, holistic wraparound services.
And I think, so the question and the framework that I've been trying to build, and I'd love to hear what you've been kind of seeing and thinking with the people you've talked to, is where does what business model make sense? I think that it's true. I believe you. And I 100% agree that sooner or later, every vertical is going to look kind of like Microsoft. You're going to get everything in one place and it's all going to be some integrated suite because all of the data works together. The brand works together. The whole thing works better together. But the question I have is, in some places, right, in say pool cleaning, we have a company called Splash that is building software for pool cleaners and buying a bunch of pool cleaners and rolling them up. And it's like, we are going to be Splash, America's pool cleaner. And we have a company called Skimmer, which just builds all of this stuff. And they have hundreds of thousands, I think, of pools managed by their software where they have, the thing that connects to your pool monitor and tells the pool cleaners where, whatever. And I think that it's probably the case, or we have, for travel agents. It is probably the case that in some of these industries, there's going to be a consumer-facing brand, and everyone is going to fold under the consumer-facing brand. And in some of these industries, they're not. That whole suite is going to be under the hood. And in some of these industries, maybe it'll make sense for there to be someone who is, even if there is one unified consumer-facing brand, it'll make sense for that to be owned individually by all these franchisees, if you will. And in some of them, it will make sense for it to be one unified operational company.
Yeah. Really, the question that you're asking is, when do I build when do I buy, and when do I build for? We tend to think about that a lot on the basis of market composition. I am highly skeptical that the high velocity serial acquiring roll-ups are going to work. When you need to buy lots and lots of small businesses to grow, you're going to run into constraints on size and velocity. You're going to mean revert, I think, pretty painfully when you say, hey, I need to keep up my growth. I need to go from buying 10 companies a year to 20 to 50 to 100. If you're doing that without meaningfully changing the cost of acquisition, the all-in cost of acquisition, it's just brutal. Buying a company for $1 million does not cost 1/5 of buying a company for $5 million, does not cost 1/5 of buying a company for $25 million. So broadly speaking, we're really only interested in helping entrepreneurs buy things when we can see a path to growth through increasing the size rather than velocity of acquisitions. Similarly, we're highly skeptical of building software companies in categories that either don't have enough customers, knowing that people have some cap on how much they're going to pay. So we have to see enough customers who can pay us enough individually to build a market in aggregate. And we have to see a path to acquire them. And then in the middle, if we're building a company from scratch, we're building an operating business from scratch, it has to be because it's uneconomical to do either of the other two. So it's sort of a series of like negative proofs along the way to find the hopefully best, but often sometimes least bad option.
Yeah.
This all has to start with a question of value creation. So what are you doing to transform the economics? And if you're doing things that require you, for instance, to own the business outright, then it's unrealistic for you to build a big business for yourself if you don't own the business outright. If you're doing things that require you to, introduce new, especially physical assets into the category, maybe you just need to build it yourself. Because if you go and buy a company, real example, we have a business that is building miniaturized lumber mills. When I first met them, my instinct was, oh, great, you're just going to go buy some lumber mills and swap out the technology. And they said, well, why would we do that? We'd be paying a whole bunch of money for some stuff that we really don't value at all. Maybe on some time horizon at TLM, the lumber manufacturer, maybe on some time horizon, they can wind up franchising or licensing their technology externally, but it doesn't make any sense for them to buy. It doesn't make any sense for them to pay a bunch for equipment and a physical plant that they really don't value. I think that's a consistent theme that we see around the hard asset requirements of these categories, where when you can help someone go and do something part-time and test the water, dip a toe in, those businesses work really well in an asset light way. We've seen that in a lot of healthcare with the mental health businesses, with the med spa companies. We've seen that in some companies in our own portfolio saying, hey, you're a technician. You work for a company doing, repairs, maybe nights and weekends, try doing this on your own. We'll find you customers. We'll give you the software. And if it works well, you'll quit and go full time. That's a business that works really well that way because you can do it for 10 hours. If you're saying, hey, there's a minimum investment of $100,000 or even $1 million, you may need to do that in a very different way. You may need to go and really prove that out, build something yourself. It's not one answer. It's sort of more of this complex flowchart around the composition of the companies in the market, the composition of the end customers, and the capital requirements to actually do the thing and bring it into the world.
Well, okay, that kind of implies some really interesting questions. One of the things that I've sort of been thinking is that it may be that this is not the tech-enabled roll-up, if you will, is not a good venture strategy, but it is a very good private equity strategy.
Totally.
That's one way of looking at this, is that if you're a private equity person, you should totally be thinking about this. Yes. Because the
next Henry Kravis is going to be the guy who just figures out if I can buy some stuff and get a bunch of engineers from Palantir and get them to work for me, I'm going to make money hand over fist. I'm really skeptical that it's going to work as a venture strategy to say that my unique value add to the world is being better at buying things.
Yes. Well, it's a very interesting question. And this maybe gets to the heart of what is venture, because KKR, let's look at the market cap. KKR is a really big company.
Totally.
This is a $100 billion business. If you could invest in the next KKR, would you?
So there's a lot of businesses that are really big and successful, and they're not good venture bets. And I don't see it as our job to just fund things that we think can be big. I see it as our job to learn things on the road to building big companies. Underwriting managerial skill is just really hard for venture, and we have a really bad track record of doing it. Now, maybe if someone wants to like cut me into the management company on some like super awesome economics, and yeah, maybe that can totally work. The problem is, what are we proving? What are the card flips? What are the cards that we're going to turn over along the way to building a big business? For us, doesn't matter what the business model is, doesn't matter what the capital structure is, doesn't matter geography. None of that is important. The only important thing is discrete, falsifiable hypotheses that we can test for true, false, on not a lot of time or dollars, where a true answer matters, it's important, and 4, there's more of those such card flips in the future. The problem with saying, I'm really good at this, give me money to do it, it sort of breaks that model. We don't have a good answer on, okay, well, what can you prove? How can you know that demonstrably? What's the thing that you think and believe that you can then say that you know, as opposed to saying, I'm going to transform the economics of this industry. I'll figure out how to build a business around that later, but I'm going to create something of clear and obvious economic value. That's a product story. That's a value creation story. Then there's a separate value capture story around how you build a business around it.
Yeah. So if I was going to take the other side of that argument, I would say, well, why wouldn't that be a card flip, right? Let's say that I'm buying pool cleaning businesses, and I feel like a pool cleaning business trades at XYZ price, and I believe, but no one's proven, that I can take technology and make a pool cleaning business twice as profitable. Isn't that a card flip worth doing?
So I think it's a card flip worth doing. The question, when we underwrite any business, we're really focused on 2 crucial moments of time. The first is, what do you do with this money over the next 1, 2, 3 years? And the second is, like, what do you look like as a public company? And we need both of them. We need to feel like we're in the money on both of those things. We need to feel like the use of proceeds off of our cash is like high expected value. It conforms to how we think about risk. And we need to feel like worth doing. At the end of the day, we can underwrite to our 100x or 1000x scenario where this is like a durable, important public company that's going to trade for the next 50 years. There are a lot of businesses that I think satisfy one of those requirements in a much smaller category that satisfy both of them at once. So there's a lot of companies where we can see awesome, 10x's where you can get from our $10 million valuation to $100, $200, $300 million valuation in a couple of years. That's great. No path to being a public company. And vice versa, there's a lot of companies that we're like, I can totally see how this is a public company. I have absolutely no idea how this is. I could convince myself this is like EV positive on 36
So
months.
let's keep playing this out.
Yeah.
KKR is a $100 billion business. That is clearly a large publicly traded company.
Yes.
I have a thesis that I'm going to do a tech-enabled PE fund. And the reason that I'm going to beat all these PE guys is because I'm so good at tech and I'm doing tons of cost takeout with tech. And so the first card flip I need with your money, Yoni, is I need to prove that I can really make a business way more profitable. And I can pay more than a PE guy can stomach.
So we're down for that. Our push to you would be build something before you go and start buying assets. The challenge with going straight to buying stuff is it's equivalent to saying, give me $10 million to hire salespeople. I'm going to do some fucking awesome sales and marketing, and then I'll figure out a product to build later. If someone can come to us and say, here's the product that I want to build, and I think it will make for an extremely valuable, like private equity style company. So give me the money to build the product, and then I'll go and start buying stuff. We'll do it. And I know that we'll do it because we've done it. We were the first money in. We did the pre-seed, the seed extension, and every round since of Team Shares, which is a serial acquirer. They've bought probably close to 100 companies at this point.
Fantastic business.
We're really, really excited about that. We think that's going to be a big, important public company one day. And the way that they started wasn't by saying, give me a few $1 million to go and buy a business and then I'll figure out what to do with it. What they said is, if we're going to buy companies in a high velocity way, we need to change the cost structure of the acquisition itself. We need to bring down the like one-time expenses of source, close, diligence, integrate all that. And that is product story. And so we can underwrite that. We can go and say, all right, here's $500,000, build a product that makes it easier and more cost effective for you to buy stuff, and then start buying things. We think that is an N of one company. We've done one other thing since then that is a similarly like high velocity acquirer. So maybe it's N of two, but like we're not typically looking to do a lot more of those, in part because when we meet people doing it, the story's almost always the same. They say, give me some money. I'm going to buy some home services companies. I'm going to buy some accounting firms. Then I'm going to build some software around it. The way that I'm going to outcompete is I'm either going to pay more or go further down market. And both of those stories compound the challenge of transaction costs, and I think run into some upper limit on the total number of companies they can buy.
Really interesting.
It's not impossible. It's just hard.
What's a company that's changed your mind recently about the way you think about SMB?
One is probably Slice, which is, I've been like so impressed by their execution. And I've been really impressed by how deep they have gone into the businesses that they partner with, into the pizza shops. Slice is obviously a really successful company. They don't need me heaping, like they have their flowers already. I thought there was a business just doing the marketplace. Like pizza is a big enough market and pizza shops have first party delivery. So they really get punished by being on, Uber Eats because it's, or DoorDash or whatever. So like, great, we're going to like find a home for them. It's a category. People search specifically for that category. That totally makes sense. I've been really impressed by how deep they've gone in offering something like much more comprehensive to their customers and partners. And yeah, that is one that I think is just really executing it.
Where else do you think that the Splice playbook should best be applied?
Yeah. The easy answer is Chinese food, but like, I think that's kind of cheap as an answer.
Well, that's really interesting because Splice has been around for a while. Why do you think that there isn't a Splice of Chinese food?
Well, there is. There's a business called, I think, Chow Bus, which I think was trying to do the same thing. And I don't know that it's a guaranteed to work. I do think it's a really good question of like, where else could it? And it has some key features to it. One is that there already is a very high population of, independent pizza shops or independent businesses. So there's not a need to, you're not trying to necessarily induce more supply. You're trying to help keep them independent. It's funny to say because it's going to look really, really different. But I actually think the most comparable business to a Slice is something like an Alma or a Headway in mental health, where it's this combination of, software and support and lead generation, and it's like inventory. It's group buying in the one hand and group selling in the other, with the sort of like supply chain relationships across. It's funny to compare pizza dough or basil with insurance contracts, but they're like sort of filling a similar role within the companies. And I did not have a deep enough appreciation for what Slice was doing until more recently. Yeah, I knew it was a good company and I knew it would, it obviously was working. I didn't fully appreciate just how deep they were going. What about you? Is there anything that you've looked at and you either were sure would work and it didn't, or you thought it wouldn't work and it is?
I'll tell you where my mind has been changing recently. One of the things that has started to call things into question for me is around the system of record versus system of engagement debate. And so basically, like, the center of gravity for the last X years of vertical technology has been you own the core system that your customers do everything in, and then you can roll out everything else. One of the big questions right now seems to be, for every small business category, there is a voice agent that's changing the game. There's someone who is answering the phone for dentists, answering the phone for plumbers, answering the phone for lawyers. And these plumbers, dentists, lawyers are signing up for these things at tremendous speeds. And the old playbook, and certainly what I would have told you if you'd asked me about this a year ago, would have been, these voice agents are fucked. because sooner or later, there's going to be a system of record that rolls out their voice agent and just turns it on, and everyone's screwed. And that might still be true. But here's one of the things that's changed my mind recently is I've started seeing companies that can operate before the system of record turns on, right? Like I believe that systems of record will ultimately own accounting and bookkeeping, just plugging in companies like Layer, is because a small business thinks about software for lawyers, software for plumbers, tools for plumbers or lawyers before they think about setting up their accounting and bookkeeping. They just want to set up their business. But that is a really important moment, is someone just wants to set up their business. And what's the thing they need the most help with? And a real agent that can answer the phone and actually do shit for you. I've seen in some of these categories like HVAC where someone wants somebody to answer the phone for them, especially because they're a small business.
Yeah.
And they're hiring one of these agents before they implement something like Service Titan, which feels complicated to them.
And what's so cool, and what we've seen as well in some other categories with the voice agents, has been because it fills the same role and has the same sort of low barrier of complexity as just like hiring a dude, or hiring some outsourced firm. There's already a motion around it that's like really, really simple. The level of like integration and onboarding, like I don't need to onboard anything. I just need to tell them to answer the phone for me.
Yes.
And one of the things that comes out of that as well, I think, is the onboarding times are lower, and crucially, the contract sizes wind up actually being
higher. Yes. You have these businesses that wouldn't pay $100 a month for software that are willing to pay $500 a month for somebody to answer the phone for them.
Because they can they have a really easy model of how to price that, which is
you get one job.
If I needed to hire to set up like a call center, I know how much it would cost me because I probably get quotes from them all the time. Or if I needed to have another receptionist, I know how much that would cost me. And so comping it, again, this is like, these are down these very big questions around selling work rather than selling software and what ultimately happens there. Like my belief is the prices will come down here. Like the margins on some of these businesses, I don't think.
Right. Because at a certain point, you're not comparing it to labor. You're comparing it to someone else's voice agent down the street.
And already today, there's some margin challenges in these companies because some of them wind up being very thin resellers of like an 11 Labs or a OpenAI or whatever. And
here's the question I have for you.
But it's going to be great for the business owners. It's going to be really great for them.
It's amazing for the business owners. And one of the questions I have that these things are really making me think about is, can you start with that voice agent and have that agent do everything for the business? So can that agent start using Layer's APIs and doing the bookkeeping for the business and saying, hey, I can do your bookkeeping, right? And the agent has a brand. Can that agent start expanding into workflows that have economies of scale or network effects or even kind of like a brand effect within an industry? Like where can that agent start to build defensible modes?
Yeah. I mean, I've been thinking of this in slightly different terms, which is, I think a lot about DoorDash and how DoorDash started, which was basically by without authorization, without coordination, just listing restaurants on DoorDash and then manually calling them in, basically like a DDoS against a restaurant. They would get more demand than they could handle through their phone system. And then DoorDash would come to them and say, hey, we've directed all this business your way and you can't manage it. So you should get on DoorDash and we'll manage it for you. To me, that is like a really appealing place for voice agents or vertical voice agents to sort of slot in, which is, we have a business in our portfolio that's kind of doing something sort of like that in insurance. So calling health insurers on the behalf of doctors. And now suddenly the cost to call a health insurer is way lower. Health insurers are going to get way more phone calls than they know how to handle. So what are they going to have to do? They're going to have to turn around and pay SuperDial to now be on the other end of it too. And suddenly they can build a business in both directions and maybe even in much the same way that DoorDash did, eventually replace it with a marketplace of data exchange rather than continuing to orchestrate all of this over the phone.
It's fascinating.
Now, you start to think about the same thing there, but for instance, for vendor management.
Dispatch.
Yeah. Hey, I need to go and get quotes. I need to get quotes for, for concrete into my construction company. Like there's not easily machine readable, catalogs that I can go and browse. I need to go and call 5 suppliers. Well, suddenly the cost to call 5 suppliers has dropped to 0. Maybe I'll call 50 suppliers. And maybe I'll call those 50 suppliers every single time I need to make a purchase. And when every construction company is doing that, suddenly the number of inbound calls to those suppliers goes way up. And those suppliers feel under a lot of pressure. Their phone systems are getting completely overwhelmed. The intent per phone call drops. They can't handle that. It becomes uneconomical to handle that process and that problem with people. They need to onboard an agent for themselves. So I do think that there is some measure of virality in these phone agents when they start going outbound.
Yeah.
That they create the need for a corresponding agent to receive the call.
Yeah.
And obviously, we're going to exist in this stupid world for some period of time where it's agents talking to agents over the phone in natural language. And that's dumb, but it will persist.
Right. But at some point, you can imagine a handshake. And that's where you start getting the sort of network effects where it's like agent calls the agent, like you said, on both sides. And that kind of implies that there are really interesting businesses to be built, basically in any vertical where...
In any vertical that requires coordination over email or phone, you're going to have
between two business categories.
Those channels are going to become overwhelming and non-performant, and you're going to need to replace them with something else. We're seeing the same thing happen in talent markets, where now the cost to outbound to talent is extremely low, and especially in categories like nursing or skilled trades, where people work on sort of short-term shifts or short-term engagements. It's not economical for them. It's not even feasible for them to parse through all the demand. I am not a doctor at all, and yet somehow I get 10 texts every week asking me about, part-time nursing shifts. I have no idea why, but I do. So you can only imagine what someone who is actually a home health aide gets. They need an agent to answer those phone calls for them because it's becoming completely unmanageable to parse through, what's quality, what conforms to my specifications, how do I get paid the most, how do I schedule these things so they all line up and the travel times work out. This is a problem that is going to get replicated as every single category just onboards. Let's do more AI for phone calls. Let's do more AI for emails. Let's do more AI for outbound. All of these channels will become non-performant, and it will necessitate creating corresponding agents to actually handle.
Yeah, I have to say this is one of the places we started to see network effects in my alma mater, SnapDocs, is we had a very, very early version of this, which was we used Twilio very early on to send a text message to someone asking if they were available for a job. And at a certain point, these people started getting inundated with text messages, and then we let them create their own profiles where they could manage their calendar. And they could show the jobs that they were on. And if they booked a job through our platform, it would automatically get added to their calendar. And so then they would only start getting text messages about jobs that were relevant to their availability. And this is something, we did this 10 years ago, and now you can start seeing this expand into so much more with voice. It's really cool because it gets more unstructured.
It's the ergonomics of voice are so different than, it just slots into channels that already work for people, which means that it is this sort of universal interface. You can talk to and communicate with any business over voice or over email already today. It doesn't require them to do anything, which means that the barrier to doing it in a really scaled way is 0.
If you like this and you want to hear more of this, I have a weekly newsletter on Substack. It's 99D. I'm on Twitter at Rechtman. So if you want to hear more of this, if you want to tell me why I'm wrong, or better yet, you want to tell me why I'm right, flattery will get you very far. Find me on the internet. I'm very easy to find and talk to.